welcome to Discard. Today we have another episode of Gameroom Tours. This is the series where we take in pictures or videos of other people's game collections. We take a look through them for cool ideas and just cool stuff along the way. Let's take a look. So the first game room that we have today is an awesome one. It's actually two different game rooms, and this comes in from Florian. Florian's game room has no lack of collectibles and a ton of games to back it up. And getting into the first room that they have here, this is their TV setup in this room, or at least one of the TV setups that they have. You can see that they have a couple different shelving systems here, both I believe from IKEA. There's a Kallax unit on the right, and I forget what the name of the TV stand is down there, but I actually do have that TV stand in my living room. But this photo alone kind of lays out what exactly you're in for here. There's a ton of collectibles, a ton of figures up above on a little shelf above the TV, and I always appreciate that because they're all laid out with enough space in between them. It's not totally choked up with a bunch of amiibo and different things on there, but I think it looks really nice above the TV. And that line of figures kind of continues from the left all the way to the right above this Kallax shelf, this cube style shelf that he has here. And in the email that Florian did send me, they told me that they have a mashup, and what they're kind of going for is, you know, Marvel meets gaming meets Japan. There's just a lot of different things being mixed in here, and I'm here for it, especially since I love all of those things. And some of the consoles that you see in this TV stand itself, you have a Nintendo Switch kind of laying on the counter down there, some mini consoles in one of the side shelves. You've got a PS3, an Xbox 360, I believe an Xbox One in there as well. There's just kind of a mix of different systems in here. Also, shout out to that Capcom fight stick down there. I think it's what they're called, fight sticks. I'm not big into the fighting games, but it looks really cool. And on the cube style shelf that he has there off to the right, he has just some of his big figures kind of tucked in there, and I really like it. It has kind of a backlighting. He does have some other photos that I'm gonna try to weave in here of how this looks when it's lit up. It almost looks like he's got each individual thing lit up specifically with different colors. I mean, he's got some Halo in here, some Death Stranding, a big question mark block. There's a lot going on in these. And just a quick note on the TV itself, I'm always a sucker for backlighting of a television. I feel like it goes a long way on any TV to have that backlighting back there, just so that brightness kind of balances out. It's really easy on the eyes, and it gives it a nice effect. And just panning to the right a little bit, you suddenly end up at another one of these. On the left of this photo, you can see part of that shelf that's still there. It had the Death Stranding baby on it, and that kind of gives you an idea of where we are in the space now. And it's kind of cool to see all this different labeling that's been going on. You'll see it a lot throughout this collection. There's little labels for what goes where, and he certainly has a lot of the systems bundled here. A lot of old Sega consoles, PlayStation, Nintendo, there's N64 and a GameCube and a Sega Saturn and a Dreamcast. There's a whole bunch of different consoles packed into this little area. And you can see there's a lot of wires going on here. I mean, that's just one of the things that we have to deal with as retro gamers. And this next picture really did shock me initially when I saw it. It's a ton of games. It is literally a wall of video games. This is a candy store for the eyes. I remember Florian was saying essentially they wanted to make this kind of like a Japanese game store. That's the vibe that they wanted to go for, and it does kind of carry that appeal. The initial aesthetic impact that I get is that kind of thing where you walk into a game store and it's just a load of colors on the wall. You have stickers down here at the bottom on some of the cabinetry and just all sorts of different colors of games. But on the left there, you can see this first shelf is pretty much Sega oriented. There's a bunch of Sega Genesis games there at the top. You have Samba de Amigo there, and you have a couple shelves on this bookcase kind of dedicated to Sega entirely, these kind of shrine-like layouts that are kind of put into there. These also actually have some of the consoles like the Sega Saturn, the Sega Genesis, and the Sega Dreamcast. These like shrine spaces in game rooms are always really neat because you can kind of find out what people are really into, what they think is more important, and those usually end up in these shrine-like spaces. You'll find out somebody really likes this game and they kind of lay things out. So there's definitely a lot of affinity in here for Sega. Moving to the bookcase to the right of that, you have Wii, Wii U, and GameCube all kind of bundled in here. This is where they are all laid out. And then at the very top of this shelf, you also have a Xenoblade shelf, which I am entirely impressed with. I love Xenoblade. I think those games are fantastic and super underrated, and more people should play them. So play them. And then the bookcase to the right of this one, you have a lot of the handheld stuff in here. So you have DS and 3DS. There's some boxes down below for figures and some other boxes at the base of that for some of the special editions that they've got along the way. There's a lot of special editions kind of throughout this entire space. Some of those big box items are at the top or kind of tucked at the bottom. And then tucked into this kind of little alleyway there next to those, you have an entire shelf, I believe, dedicated to PS Vita. I'm pretty sure from this image, these are all PS Vita games. This is a lot of PS Vita games. I know there's some big collectors out there that collect a lot of PS Vita games, but it's not every day that you see a massive collection of them like this. And it's just an incredibly hard system to collect for in general. And this next shot really does show off a lot of that Japanese aesthetic that he's going for. You have that shelf at the left here, and this is all PSP games. So I imagine they really got into PSP and then carried that on into Vita to continue to collect that as well. They have a ton of PSP games as well. This whole shelf is dedicated to it, so it's actually crazy. But to the right of that, you have a few question mark blocks on the side of that shelf, and then on the side of the wall over there, there's this awesome Soul Calibur GameCube poster. Soul Calibur on GameCube was amazing. You get to play as Link, and you get to do it. It's so cool. It was the best one. Fight me. And then to the right of that, you get that nice Japanese aesthetic with the wall scrolls kind of covering up the door and making this space more and more filled up. One of the ideas for making this space like a Japanese store is fill up all the walls. And if you ever look up a game store in Japan, you'll see every wall, every bit of space is taken up in those spaces. And it just makes this really crazy effect. And this next shot shows another corner of the room here with the ends of some of these bookcases. You got that kind of Japanese eclectic feel about it as well. You can see he's really laying into that. Also has a really cool arcade 1-up machine down here. What makes this really interesting is that he's got multiple kind of aisles in his room. So you have that aisle that we saw earlier with at the very end of it, it had PS Vita games. And then you have this other aisle down here past Arcade 1-up that just leads into a bunch of other games on a bunch of other bookshelves that are kind of back to the other bookshelves. So it's kind of a confusing layout, but you really start to get that kind of game store effect. And I really like this perspective shot of kind of looking down this aisle. It gives you an idea of what it looks like if you were to be standing in this hallway, kind of looking down at all of these games, what effect it would have on you. And I don't know, I just find myself wanting to look from shelf to shelf in this space. And they have a ton of boxed Super Famicom games here starting at the left, and that kind of leads into the next shelf, which is Xbox 360 games, and then you end up at some PlayStation games at the back there, and it just wraps around. And I just want to spend hours kind of looking through this collection and kind of picking things out, trying them out on the TV and see what's what, because there's just so much here. And one of these shelves really reminds me of my trip to Japan, and it's this kind of shrine shelf here, and it seems like kind of a catch-all for a lot of random items. There's a Pokemon Mini in here, some sort of Final Fantasy Tactics box, which I'm not exactly sure what that is for. There's a Persona 4 Golden poster there on the side of the other shelf, and just a lot of different little knickknacks, some canned goods, and other items that are Japanese branded. Just kind of gives this overall effect. I really like it. Now getting to the shelves on the right side of this aisle, you have PS4 and PS3 games all laid out on the right-hand side. So now we've kind of worked up to these modern consoles with the PS4 still being mostly current gen for the most part. And in this next photo, you also get to see the shelf next to that one, which has Nintendo Switch titles in it, a lot of Nintendo Switch games, and a lot of empty space down below here. Looks like this area is to be determined, and it's always good to have a little bit of space to kind of grow into and find new places to put things. I'm sure it's gonna get filled up if he's going for this vibe through and through. But hey, I'm sure that box copy of Secret of Mana down there is having a fantastic time, just chilling out, taking that shelf to itself. And honestly, there's a ton of stuff going on in that room, so I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next room so I don't run out of time for that one as well. And I think this photo really says the most about this next room. This is kind of a workspace, but it's also mixed with a lot of gaming memorabilia and different items and games and just endless amounts of stuff. This guy has so much cool stuff. From the left, you have his computer there where he is looking at some very interesting material there on the screen, which, I want to subscribe to that. But to the right of that, there's this really cool, I think it's 2 gashapon machines on top of each other, or it's one piece with 2 gashapon compartments on it. But these are really cool. In Japan, you can go up to these, put a coin in there, and you spin the thing and it spits out a little toy. It can be a whole bunch of different things. There's entire businesses that are dedicated to gashapon in Japan, and it's a really fun, kind of addictive activity. Really cool to see it on somebody's desktop though, next to their computer. It really adds to the space in my opinion. And then the wall art in this area is absolutely immaculate, with a bunch of Japanese Nintendo games kind of perfectly framed up here. I think framing some of your retro games or your consoles that you probably won't be playing anytime soon or you have another copy of is really cool because you get to see them all the time. They're out there in the open. You get that artwork, you get that full effect of those things all the time, and it adds to a space here that's all about gaming. And on another angle to this area, you can kind of see that there's another gashapon machine here, a full-sized one this time, next to an awesome store display. These things are incredibly hard to find and expensive, and I'm super jealous. Why am I always jealous of you guys? And with a little bit of a better close-up here, you can see that PlayStation store display down there on the lower left, and you have all these gashapon machines. Looks like one is Gundam and one is Kirby, so some very good choices when it comes to picking which machine you were going for. And in the PlayStation store display, it looks like they have some of their console boxes that they've kind of tucked into there, so that kind of fills the void of that area. And at the very bottom of the PlayStation display, you can see some Yoshi slippers, I believe. Boy, I hope those make the Yoshi noise. And to the right of the gashapon there, you can see that this is the door that goes into the room that we were previously looking at. So it gives you kind of an idea of how these spaces are connected together. A wider shot of that area also shows some more framed discs, more framed games on the back of that door, which is really cool. And then to the right of that, you have some enclosed bookcases. And this enclosed bookcase, which I think is a Billy bookcase with the additional doors that you can get to close these. It's one of the fantastic things about these IKEA bookcases is you can get all these add-ons and close them and put lighting and do a whole bunch of stuff to these bookcases within that kind of IKEA catalog of things. And what they've done here is use this as a way to display a lot of little minifigures. So they've got a ton of little minifigures from Nintendo kind of laid out in here, and then in the back, they even have some stickers on the wall to kind of carry on that theme of keeping every bit of space kind of covered. To the right of that, there's another little media shelf. These thin little shelves that they used to get at IKEA, these are fantastic. They don't make them anymore, and they were the perfect size for your games. I mean, they were exactly the right depth for any game that you were going to use, and boy, I miss them. But what he's used this for is a bunch of Japanese games. I believe these are Japanese Dreamcast games and other Sega games kind of mixed in there, but I'm not quite sure. And getting a wide shot of this back area certainly helps to kind of clarify where everything is, how this is laid out, why Iron Man's head is coming through the wall, and taking a look at this awesome MVSX. These Neo Geo MVSXs really make me super jealous because it's exactly what I want to get for my own game room someday. It just has the giant catalog of all these fantastic arcade games that I grew up with. And on the far right, past the second door, he has these two shelves that are dedicated to the Marvel universe. There's a ton of Marvel figures and different things here. He has Amiibo across the top as well, but boy, is there a lot of Marvel. And again, I just really like these shelves. I love the ability to put these kind of glass doors on the front of these shelves so you don't have to really worry about dusting anything except for, say, the glass once in a while. And while there is a ton more of this space that I could talk about all day long, and we can make an entire video dedicated to this game room, the last thing that I'm going to talk about would be to the left of where his computer was when we talked about that earlier. And that's another store display, a Super Nintendo store display. Now, I don't know that this came from the Super Nintendo era or whatever, but it does look like a legitimate store display. He's got Super Nintendo games in it, and it looks fantastic. These are the kind of displays that I love to see. You know, even that NES down there at the bottom looks perfect. It looks like it fits in there. This really does give off that store vibe, and boy, do I want to have one of these someday, but man, are they expensive. I mean, if only there was a glove that I could get that I could put like superpowered stones into, and then I could just snap my fingers and, you know, boom, I would have a Super Nintendo store display. So that's the end of Florian's space for now. There was a lot of other photos and video pieces that he had in here, and I just don't have enough time to talk about every little bit of his game room. It is an amazing space with tons of little features and things to talk about. Florian's collection is amazing, and definitely thank you very much for sending it in. I highly appreciate it. And this next game collection comes in from Tom. This is an amazing space, and I'm gonna give you this first shot because it shows off all the consoles in this mega giant TV stand that's all kind of linked together down here. It looks awesome. And I really like this shot because he's got very specific games on each one of his TVs, clearly showing this kind of evolution of Zelda. But I always appreciate a setup that has both an HD TV and a CRT TV because you get the best of both worlds. You've got your retro games as well as your modern games working on either one of those TVs. Whatever you need, it's there on these TV stands. And speaking of the TV stands, it looks like this is two different TV stands kind of pushed together. And this is awesome because at first when I looked at this, I thought this was one long long TV stand, but upon closer inspection, of course, I saw it was 2. And in the TV stands themselves, of course, you have the retro consoles there, and those span from super retro all the way up to right now in the next gen era that we're in with the PS5. Just a quick look for me down all of these different consoles always is a trip down memory lane. I can remember games being played on each and every one of these consoles and really enjoying myself along the way. Little pieces of memory pop up, and I always appreciate it. Another interesting thing about the TV stand is in the back there's this kind of galvanized metal looking backing back there, which seems to be really good for kind of transferring light and having this kind of internal glow, which I really appreciate. It took me a while to kind of notice that it was back there at all. And you can really see in one of the videos that he sent with the lighting kind of down in the room and the LEDs that he has inside of these TV stands on, you see that glow kind of coming through and really gives this nice effect to the space. And I think it's really good for your eyes to have kind of some other light other than the TV that you're looking at. At least for me, definitely makes my eyes relax a little bit more when I'm looking at that TV playing some games. And to the left of his HD TV, he also has one of these big glass displays. These are really great for displaying figures, and we've talked about them a lot of times, but it's always interesting to see what is actually in them. And there's a lot of older figures in here kind of mixed in with a lot of modern stuff. And it's always interesting to kind of look around and see what people think is awesome, what should be on display. Now on the other side of the room, we get this great video shot of this bookcase back there, and this is a media shelf. You can always tell because it's a lot thinner, and I do really appreciate these because they don't stick out as far. If you're walking into a space or you have these shelves near a door, you're gonna wanna go with a media shelf that just doesn't poke out as much and is just the perfect size for your games. But starting at the top of the shelf, you have a bunch of plushies at the very top. The next shelf down has a bunch of figures as well as amiibo. Then you have kind of a handheld shelf area as well as some custom boxes there as well. I always appreciate seeing some Game Boys on display on some display stands so that they can kind of shine there as opposed to just kind of laying them down flat. The next shelf gets into PlayStation. You have PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4 games all lining this shelf. Then it gets even more modular as you're going down. You have some Sega Genesis games, a couple little displays to the right of those with a Zelda plushie and a 3DS on a display stand, which is really nice. Below that, some retro cartridges. You have your NES carts and your Super Nintendo cartridges kind of tucked in there. The next couple shelves down are Wii, GameCube, your N64, Wii U, Nintendo Switch, and even some PC games are down there. And of course, a nice set of Xbox 360 games sitting next to some Lord of the Rings Pez dispensers. That's the first one for me. But the general idea of this shelf is just an overall media shelf for the space. You can tell this person is a collect what you love type person, where they're kind of collecting games as they like them and enjoy them and keeping those games. Now, a new angle on this space, you get to see the 3 chairs. These chairs are like movie theater chairs. I see these on occasion in people's spaces, but this is like the utmost comfort that you can get when you're playing games or watching a movie or whatever you're doing. I like that there's 3 in there, so you know, most times that's gonna cover most people, and you'll be able to sit there, chill out, have your cup holder, and enjoy some video games, which is awesome. And another thing to note about this collection, you can see behind those chairs, there's some artwork on the wall, some Persona artwork, and throughout the space, there's a couple pictures kind of here and there. And so you have a couple pictures of different Mario characters. You've got Mario and Luigi. And then in another part of the space, you have a couple pictures of Zelda. And these are all laid out really nicely, and they're not too much, so they're really making this space feel very big by not putting too much on the walls. It just makes for a much bigger feeling space if that's what you're going for. Also, shout out to a couple of these LED shelves that are up on the wall. I always appreciate seeing these guys. You have a few pop figures up there at the top, as well as some amiibo down below on those shelves. These are just really easy. You can get these, pop them on your wall, and you're set to display a few different items and not take up a bunch of space. These really make it feel still big in there, and you still can display these things and display them as little pieces of artwork on your wall. And then the final set of artwork goes across this, I don't know what you call it, a soffit that kind of goes across the ceiling here, and that's a ton of Perler artwork. I always love to see Perler. You see them at game conventions, people make them and sell them online, and you can easily make them yourself. And it's perfect for these kind of 8-bit characters that are out there. These old school retro characters work fantastic with Perler, and they always look really awesome in my opinion. And the last little area I wanted to talk about was these 2 little stands that are underneath this question mark block light back there, which is cool on its own by itself. But you have Sonic and you have Tails up here holding a couple controllers. These are the Cable Guys display stands. They call them charging display stands, but they don't really charge anything. You just plug in your charger to your device while they're in their hands. But they work really good as display stands, especially for wireless controllers like in this case. So as I'm looking at this awesome carpet that they have in the room here, I just think it's a great collection. I think it's very simple. It's not a massive giant space that they're in here. It's just a nice layout, a very airy location, a very big contrast to the previous collection that we were talking about that was going for that Japanese store vibe where you have a lot of stuff on the walls and it gives you, you just want to look at everything in the space. This one kind of makes it a little bit more relaxed and open feeling, and just a bigger feeling to this space. If you have a small space, make sure you paint things white and leave a lot of space between things, because that's going to make it feel a lot more open and just give it this really nice effect. So big thanks to Tom for sending this in, and man, that TV stand setup is super good. And this next space is kind of a quick one to look at. It's a smaller space. It is a bedroom sized area. And you can see how many different things you can do within a small space like this to make it feel very good, as well as have space to store and display a few items. This collection comes in from another Tom, and I'm going to start off with this picture of the TV stand. This is another one of these all-in-one TV stands that has a bunch of cube-style shelves around it, and you can immediately see that they really have some very good taste in what they watch there on their TV. Now to the left of the TV and to the right of the TV, I believe they have a Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. So no console wars in this house. Nobody's picking one over the other. This person wants it all, and that's what they got. Now underneath there's a small shelf for some retro consoles. They have an N64, I think a Sega Dreamcast, a Sega Genesis, a Wii, and a Wii U down there, I believe. And there's a couple other cube style shelves down beneath that, and that's where these Xbox consoles get to go and hang out. They also have some of these fabric cubes, which are really good for this kind of TV stand, because they allow you to hide some stuff. Put some controllers in there, some extra cordage, these cameras that come with stuff, you put them all inside these boxes and they're out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to worry about them kind of messing up the visuals of your space. On the left side of this TV stand, going from the bottom to the top, I do have another one of those fabric cubes down there, but above that there's a GameCube console in here with a little stand in the back kind of holding a couple figures and a couple items in here. I do like in the back there they have this kind of riser back there to kind of raise things up. You can do a lot of things with those risers, especially with consoles, to kind of fill out a space and kind of fill that backing. If you just had the GameCube in here per se, you'd have all that other half a shelf above it in these cube style shelves that would just go empty. So putting something back there really does help balance out the space. Now the real question with a space like this is, where are all the games? If this is a small room, how are you packing all the games into this room? This person must not have very many, but in reality, they have tons of video games in this space, and they're utilizing their bed in order to do so. Now what they have is one of these beds with the drawers that are underneath of it, and they filled all of those drawers with all of their games. So whenever they need a game for a specific system, they can just go down, pull out that drawer, and get a game out of there. This drawer here is packed with PlayStation 2 games, and quite a lot of them. I certainly have way less PlayStation 2 games than this. This is a bunch. And most of their other games are on the other side of the bed in this other drawer. This side has your PS3, PS4 games, Wii U, Xbox 360, and some others in there as well. There's a ton of games in this side as well. These are a lot of games that they have just kind of stored underneath their bed for easy access. And then in another shot that they sent us, they have this kind of side table next to their bed, and at the bottom there's another drawer that pulls out that has their modern Xbox games in it. So all these drawers combined have a ton of video games. So it does go to show that you can store some video games in spaces that you might not necessarily think about in the first place. And this allows you to kind of free up your space for other things, like that big TV stand that's across the way there, and just having that nice open feeling to that area. Now there's a lot of other ways to display things in small spaces, and I do talk about those things all the time. I do want to make a video in the future dedicated to small spaces and some little tips and tricks you can do to kind of maximize a small space like this. But I really do appreciate Tom sending in the pictures of this. I always like to get these small collections into Discard so I can take a look at them and kind of show people these different ways that you can do things in these smaller spaces. And just a reminder to everybody that you can send in pictures or videos of your collection. There's always a link in the description that explains exactly how you can go about doing that. There'll be a link in the comments, in the description, in every other video that we've made so far on Gameroom tours. There's always a way to find that link to that video. In the video, it just explains how to do it, where to send it, and the types of videos and pictures that we're looking for. But outside of that, I really appreciate all of you guys coming by today, taking a look at this stuff, getting shirts. I really appreciate that. That helps pay for the display ideas that I do have on the channel outside of Gameroom tours. I hope you guys have a fantastic day today and collect what you love.